All right, y'all. What's up, man? We back. Welcome to the podcast with Soul. Do me a favor. Go on Instagram right now and type in the same name, the podcast with Soul. My page is gonna come up, and please follow me on Instagram. I'm also on Facebook. That name is underneath. That link is also underneath this video. Sean Gumby. Those are the only three social media platforms that I'm on, and I want to thank those for subscribing to my channel here. Now, so this is part two, right? And this is what we got. Okay. So I pulled down the paperwork. The video I did yesterday, right, was largely based on, like I told you in that video, information my man gave me, right, who I was in federal prison with. I did 16 months. I was sentenced to 18 months on a white collar beef. I did 15 months, 15 days, and 19 hours at FCI Morgantown in Morgantown, West Virginia. And I met Black. I got there in October 2014. I met Black like around December. He's from East St. Louis. He's from the Boogie. He got there like December, and me and him was tight for the remaining 13 months I was there. And that's my man still to this day. So I see a lot of y'all in the comment section, and that's fine. You know, you can say what I'm saying is cap. I don't know what I'm talking about, and that's fine. I don't care nothing about that. But one thing I do know is that, paperwork doesn't lie. And I'm not a fan of Big Meech. I'm not a fan of Cuffy. I'm not a fan of Tammy Cowins. I'm not a fan of the United States government. I don't care about any of them. You understand what I'm saying? I only got involved in this particular content because my nigga Black is from the Boogie, East St. Louis, which is right next door to St. Louis. And I remember him telling me, that's my cat, when we was in prison together about this story, but I didn't think nothing of it. I had forgot all about it because we talk about so much. And I've been home. I got released January 2016. So I've been out of prison for, 9 years now? But he did tell me this story once before. But when it started popping up in the in my YouTube feed, in the algorithm, and I didn't know about the dude Cuffy. But when they said it was St. Louis, I knew that if I called my nigga Black, I knew he was gonna know something about it. And sure enough, I called him, and he did, and he told me the whole story. And a lot of what he said, and a lot of what I said in the first video is accurate. But here's the paperwork. The link is underneath this video. I'm also gonna put it in the comment section. This is it's the United States District Court, Eastern District of Missouri, Eastern Division, right? So Cuffy was serious about this case because he requested a Franks hearing, right? A Franks hearing. Get down. He requested a Franks hearing. When it was all going down, he was fighting for his life, right? And from what my nigga Black told me, it doesn't say much about it here, but he was looking at the death penalty, right? Because there was some murders of some government witnesses, right? So he felt like, let me go all the way. So he applies for a Franks hearing and he gets it. And let me explain to you what a Franks hearing is, right? A Franks hearing is a legal proceeding that determines if a police officer's affidavit for a search warrant contained false or misleading information. The hearing is named after the 1978 Supreme Court case, Franks versus Delaware, right? A defendant, when is a Franks hearing held? When a defendant may request a Franks hearing if they believe the officer intentionally or recklessly included false information in the affidavit. Okay? You can look this up on your own. The defendant must show that the false information was necessary to establish probable cause. The defendant may also request a Franks hearing if the search resulted in discovery of incriminating evidence, right? What happens at a Franks hearing? The defendant challenges the affidavit. So what it was, in the initial affidavit that Tammy Cowins, who was a government informant and who is referenced in this document, which is the motion to suppress. Hold on. She's listed in this paperwork as CS1, Confidential Source 1, right? Now, this document, the defense filed this motion, Cuffy filed after he had the Franks hearing. He was granted, the court granted him the Franks hearing. They could have denied the Franks hearing, right, if they didn't believe, it was sufficient, right? But they gave him a Franks hearing, and then after the Franks hearing, right, he filed the motion to have the electronic surveillance evidence suppressed. It was a motion to suppress because there were lies and misstatements in the affidavit, the initial affidavit filed and signed by Tammy Cowins, who was a government informant, right? And it's all here. What happened, how it all went down in this motion to suppress, the key date is August the 5th, 2012, right? This is the date where Tammy Cowins, who is CS1, is trying to connect a Mexican dude from California named Fidel Suarez and Dion Gatlin, who is Cuffy, that's his government name, to do a drug deal, right? Now, they've tapped Cuffy's phone by this time. And the way in the initial affidavit, just get the paperwork and read it. I'm just a YouTuber, kid. In the initial affidavit, Tammy Cowins puts in the affidavit, this is the one she signs, that Demetrius Flannery, Big Meech, put her, Tammy Cowins, CS1, in contact with Fidel Suarez and instructed her to contact Dion Gatlin, Cuffy, to do a drug deal. That's in the sworn affidavit signed by Tammy Cowins. So, Tammy, in this document, says she had been a government informant for years. And when in here it says she first met Big Meech, I think in 2009, of which she had already been a government informant, right? And she befriended him. This is all in here. You can read it. And she, by this time, Meech has already been convicted and is doing 30 years, 360 months, 30 years in the federal system, of which you have to do 85% of that time. 10% would be 30 months, another 45 months. So you knock off, you're probably looking at about 26, 25 and a half, 26, whatever that number is, right? So he's already sentenced. It also talks about here how she has the life rights and all of this stuff, and it's worth probably about $1 million. But anyway, she begins to facilitate this drug deal between Fidel Suarez from California and Dion Gatlin, known as Cuffy, from St. Louis. Now, her handler in Atlanta is a dude named Keith. What's my man's name? Keith Comers. What's my man? Keith Cromer. Keith Cromer is the special agent in charge that's handling her, right? He tells her what to do. He's the DEA Atlanta Group Supervisor, Keith Cromer. Now, at the time of this motion, he's being investigated by the Office of Professional Responsibility and the Office of Inspector General for his inappropriate relationship with Tammy Cowins, improper payments to Tammy Cowins, and falsified reports to justify improper payments to this girl. Now, they begin what starts as a personal relationship, as per this document, evolves into a sexual relationship, right? They go on this sexual escapade. And it's proven because Tammy has pictures of them together in her phone, right? And he's being investigated for same, right? So this is one of the reasons why Cuffy and his attorney feel like all of the information in that affidavit, right, should be thrown out because of the improper relationship between the special agent Keith Cromer and the informant, right? Keith Cromer, you know what I'm saying, got lost his moral compass, right? Once he started having sex with this woman. He's paying her, and it talked about here, on a monthly basis. And sometimes there was information from another informant, which was CS2. CS2 would provide actionable evidence, actionable information that was good for the case, but he wouldn't pay CS2. He would give it to her. This is what he was doing, right? You know, a woman and her kitty cat is strong, man. You understand? Now, in the affidavit, right, and it talks about it in here, how Big Meech and Suarez met in the county jail in Detroit, like around 2005. And, you know, that's how they befriended each other. Now, as this hearing is going, the judge is listening to all of this testimony, right? And the judge talks about it in here. She says, this is the judge's words in here. They called the witnesses. They put Keith Cromer on the fan. They put Keith Cromer on the stand at this hearing to testify at the Frank's hearing, and a couple of the other agents underneath him, right, that he was in charge of. The agents that were underneath Keith Cromer pled the fifth. They took the fifth. They pled the Fifth Amendment, which means that they didn't want to get on the stand and say anything that was self-incriminating, right? Self-incriminating. So that means that, you know what I'm saying, everything ain't right and exact with what I did. Homeboy Keith Cromer did the same thing. He pled the fifth. But then he went back on that and said, nah, I'm not going to invoke my Fifth Amendment. Put me on the stand. So he takes the stand and he begins to answer questions. And then this whole sexual tryst comes out, right, between him and Tammy Cowins. At first, he says it was just personal. It was never sexual. But this totally contradicts what Tammy Cowins already signed in the affidavit and already said. Yeah, he was knocking me down. I was knocking him down. We was getting busy. This nigga get on the stand and say, nah, it was just personal. So right there, you know, these are the things that Cuffy and his defense is saying, yo, look at the inconsistencies. One, the improper relationship, right? Two, the inconsistencies in their statements. So nothing that they ever put in can be credible, right? So the judge hears all this testimony, and the judge out her mouth says, look, I think it was like 7 witnesses for the government, and I don't know, maybe 6 for the defense, for Cuffy. She said, she said all of the witnesses that took the stand and testified here, all of them are credible, except one. And she said CS1, which was Tammy Cowins. So much of her testimony contradicted itself. And even Keith Cromer, right? Some of his information, and they writing this stuff in an affidavit while they're having sex, right? You know, in here it talked about the first time, or one of the first couple times, Fidel Suarez called Tammy Cowins on the phone. She put him on the speakerphone, right? And Keith Cromer was there. And then another time she said, well, he wasn't there. I hooked him up on a 3-way. Suarez called me and I patched Keith in on a 3-way unbeknownst to Suarez. And then Keith get on the stand and said, no, it wasn't that. It's just bad, right? So also what's key is a lot of people are saying that Big Meech was unaware of what Tammy Cowins was doing. But the paperwork says otherwise. He was aware, right? Because number one, she signed in the initial affidavit, the one she signed, there's another one that she does that she doesn't sign, and I'm going to get there. She testifies and swears in an affidavit that Demetrius Flannery told her to reach out to Fidel Suarez in California and put Fidel Suarez in contact with Cuffy, excuse me. I don't know much about drug law. I went to the feds on a white collar beef. I listened to a lot of dudes talk about them drug cases that make 48s. They know more about that than me, conspiracy and all of that. And also it talked about in here that when Demetrius Flannery, Big Meech, put Tammy in contact with, somebody's trying to call me, in contact with Suarez and told Suarez to get in touch with Cuffy, that he had the potential to make monetary gain, right? Which would tie him up in the conspiracy, right? Now he's already in prison at this point. And Tammy does just what she does exactly what Big Meech tells her to do. So during the hearing, her testimony, because she's a confidential source, is behind closed doors to protect her identity. But so much information is coming out in this hearing that some of the records are made public that Niggas on the street is figuring out it can't be nothing but her. So she goes to her agent in charge and says, yo, I fear for my safety. So they seal all her records at this particular hearing. And the lead agent kind of tells the judge, like, yo, we got to chill with her because she has perceived or is receiving threats based upon publicly available documents, right? So she jumps in her whip, she jumps in her car, drives to Louisiana, right? I guess this is where Big Meech is locked up at. I don't know. But in the paperwork, she drives to Atlanta and meets Big Meech. She tries to meet him. She don't get to meet him. But somehow, while she's there, she gets in contact with him. That's my cat. And she is explaining to him everything that's going on in this. And he tells her, it's in here, those measures included contacting the undersigned magistrate judge whose chambers referred the CSI to United States Attorney and driving several hours to Louisiana soon after learning about the court filing to attempt to see Flannery to try to explain her position and try to deflect any accusation coming Tammy Cowins' way. Although it appears that Tammy did not speak with Flannery in Louisiana on March the 6th, CS1's hearing testimony suggests that when CS1 did finally speak with Flannery, he advised Tammy he didn't want his name caught up in this mess, right? That's all right here. So I've been seeing a lot of people saying, you know, she was doing this unbeknownst to him and he was aware, right? He knew what was going on, right? This is here. This isn't me. This is here. Now, after she talks to Meech, she dips back to either it was St. Louis, because by this time, the Atlanta DEA and the St. Louis DEA are working hand in hand to try to put this thing together, right? So she goes back to Atlanta and she recants everything she said in the first affidavit. She recants everything after speaking to Meech. But she never signs the affidavit. She does a new affidavit. The first affidavit was a sworn affidavit where I told you she expressly states that Big Meech told her to contact Suarez so that Suarez and Gatlin can do a drug deal. Now, after this, she go back and say, yo, everything I said, that ain't true. Ain't none of that right and exact. And she says, Big Meech didn't tell her to do nothing, right? You know, but the judge doesn't believe it, right? Because after she spoke to Suarez, when Suarez was in St. Louis, Suarez came from California to St. Louis to meet with her. She wouldn't meet with him. She declined to meet with him. He said, yo, let's get together. I want to meet you. She declined to meet with him. He sent her a picture of himself. She didn't meet with him. He's calling her. Suarez is calling her back to back. She ain't picking up the phone. He like, yo, you know, I'm trying to get in touch with you. What's up? Then he told us, look, I got the fucking truck there with the drugs. Where is Cuffy? This is all in there. So him and Cuffy eventually do get together, but after she did the call speaking with Suarez, the investigation, now that this was going down in St. Louis, the DEA from St. Louis got involved and they immediately debriefed her. She spoke with Suarez on August the 5th. On August the 6th, the very next day, the St. Louis DEA debriefed her. And she told him, then Big Meech told me to contact Suarez and for Suarez to get in touch with Cuffy so that they could do a deal. So not only did she put it in the first affidavit, she told my man in St. Louis, the DEA agent, he was a task force officer, TFO. She told him. And he testified that, yeah, she told me that, right? And documented it. So, like, everything that she said, and Cromer, you know, he eventually gets fired, the agent. There was another lie she told after she came back from seeing Meech. She told the lie that her and Cromer were together at her house when Suarez called, and Cromer heard on the speakerphone the whole conversation, which was a lie because at the time that she said the call was made, he was out of town with his family on vacation. And the feds proved it because they pulled his credit card receipts and say he couldn't have been in Atlanta with you because the nigga was in South Carolina. All this is in here, man. And that's pretty much it, man. But Cuffy's motion to suppress the evidence was denied. He was denied because they said that her lies and Keith Cromer's lies and their sexual escapade, even if it was stricken from the hearing, it still wasn't. There was still sufficient evidence to have probable cause to indict Cuffy and keep the case moving. You understand? And it also talked about her helping knock off Terry White. I don't know who he was, and she was paid $55,000. Some of the proceeds, what they took from Terry White, she got a percentage of that because she provided actionable information that led to an arrest and conviction. And then after that, she signed up to become a professional informant and was getting paid on a monthly basis by the DEA. All of that's in here. So, you know, it's a pretty interesting thing. I just read this whole thing. It's a pretty interesting case. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, I don't care about anybody in this case. You know, like I say, I only made this video so I could get views, right? Full disclosure. And another reason is I did Fed time. And, you know, people told on me, right? And so I know how it go. And like I said, I did 16 months in there, and I heard all kind of stories, man. And, you know, one thing I do know is that paperwork is the paperwork. You understand? And, you know, I don't want to make any inferences. Everything that you heard me just share with you is in this document. I'm going to put it right underneath this video, and I'm also going to put it in the comment section. You know, and that's it. You know, I don't like to, you know, because when I was in the feds, man, you know, and if you know, you know. If you've never been in the federal system and been to a federal prison, you're not going to be able to understand this. But the one thing you don't want to be in federal prison is hot, right? in the feds, the term hot is not a good thing, right? I don't know about out here, yo, that record hot, that car hot. In the feds, when they say you are hot, that means you a rat, you a snitch, you are no good, your name is no good, nothing about you is good, and you are to be shunned and stayed away from. And a lot of that, if you get on a federal prison compound, there's gonna be a lot of gossip. Yo, he hot, and niggas just be saying this out of their mouth without no proof of paperwork. You understand? But the paperwork is what it is, and you can't get around it. And the thing about it is, once you become a rat, you can never get out from underneath it. Your children can't get out from underneath it. Even when you dead and gone, you can't get out from underneath it. Right? Now, I know in today's culture, nobody cares about that, right? Doesn't matter your moral turpitude, right? Your integrity, right? Whether you straight up and down like 6 o'clock, whether you a real nigga like we like to say, none of that matters anymore. What matters is your celebrity, how many followers you got, how much money you got, irrespective of how you acquired the money. But in the feds, it means everything. It means everything. And in your soul, and in your psyche, and within your family, it means everything. And when I caught my case, I had mandatory incarceration. And I was scared to go to prison. I was nervous. I had never been to state prison. I did some county jail time. Fulton County Jail, Atlanta, Georgia, DeKalb County Jail on Memorial Drive. I had been locked up in precinct on 135th Street in Manhattan, in Harlem, and Central Booking, 100 Center Street, but I had never did prison time. So they told me I had mandatory prison time. I was nervous as a cat on a high tin roof in July. And I had the option to do a 5K1. They told me, Sean, you could wear cameras, you could wear microphones, you can turn in your own clients. And, my son was the pawn, right? Because 27 days before I got ready to self-surrender, his mother filed for custody, and I didn't know what she was gonna do. I didn't know what was gonna happen with my son, because by that time we had a falling out. You understand? She was involved in my case, and there was some questions with that. You know what I'm saying? And then she was dealing with a guy that knew me and her. He knew me, and I was dealing with her, and he was gonna be with her and my son while I was in prison. And I just, I was concerned for his safety. But when they started talking that, man, I said, nah, man, because my son, he got the same name as me, man. You understand? That's just gonna be a chance I'm gonna have to take. You understand? I'm gonna go ahead and do these 18 months or however much I'm gonna do, come home, and hopefully, I'll be able to find my son wherever. I didn't know if they was gonna take him or what. And so I know the pressure, but I just, it wasn't nothing I could do. You know what I'm saying? I caught my case here in my town, and I got released back to my town. When you see dudes that catch a case in this part of the country, and when they get released to a whole nother region of the country, it could be surmised and concluded that he got some static back where he caught his case, because he may have not been right and exact, and he need to go hundreds of miles away for his safety. You know what I'm saying? That's what an assumption that can be made. Not to say that it's always true. Sometimes dudes keep it 100, stay straight up and down like 6 o'clock, and they get released and they just feel like going to another part of the country to start over. But you know, once you go that route, you can't come back from it, man. And you know, integrity is important. You know, authenticity never went out of style and never will. Integrity never went out of style and never will. And you know, being a man amongst men never goes out of style. Podcast with Soul. Go follow me on my Instagram, Podcast with Soul, and subscribe to the channel here. Sean G. Peace.